Thank you so much for joining me today at Trevor Nichols Farmer, Chris. I know that we talked a little bit about some questions you had about leasing farmland and stuff like that. And I thought it would be some of the questions you had, I thought would be really great to get you in the same room as educator Chris, because I think that I think a lot of the questions you had were pretty soft skill related, and I think he'll be able to help a lot with, help make sure that that you're leasing everything and getting what you want out of it.
Yeah, thanks for connecting.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for joining us here at beautiful Trevor Nichols. So one of the first things you talked about was just kind of like the start of leasing land. And it sounded like you had a lot of questions about just like communicating your needs about what you wanted to get out of the land and the arrangement that you had.
So I guess there's a little complexity because I'm looking for two types. One, I'm looking for row crops, or actually I'm planning to do some small grains, and then so that's annual. But then on the other hand, I got I need to do another hay planting.
That makes sense. Hay's different. Hay and grains aren't very similar. You're gonna have different goals with both of them. So, educator Chris, what would you say?
Well, first, you want to think about what you're planning to do with the ground. So there's a lot of different ways. So as you mentioned, you've got small grains or field crops. Uh, so are you going to do till? Are you going to do no till with that? And then for your hay seeding, obviously you're going to want more than 1 year. So about how, do you have a pulse on how many years you need to make sure that you you recoup your investment from that? One of the things I think is important when you're communicating those needs is just to talk specifically about how you farm. So again, do you do till or no till, and your different approaches and kind of what that looks like.
Cool, because you want to be on the same team, is what it sounds like. You and the landowner are on the same team. You want to grow awesome grains, awesome hay, and the landowner just wants to make sure that their land is taken care of.
Yeah, and connected to that, is trying to understand and address, both parties' goals, right? So what are the goals of the landowners? Another thing to think about. Are they gonna want to hunt? Do they walk the property regularly? So for the financial aspect, maybe it's depending on the situation, good to see if you can ask about what they need the rent for. Is the rent just needed to cover taxes or taxes and insurance, or maybe they need a little income from that rent? So that's a part of the negotiation process. So yeah, just understanding everybody's goals will lead to better outcomes.
Yeah, because like I said before, you guys are on the same team, and you want to make sure this is mutually beneficial. And I'm sure sharing how excited you are to farm in the area will go a long way because it's a relationship ultimately that you're building. So another thing you mentioned when we were talking, Farmer Chris, that you mentioned when we were talking on the phone is um, during the actual conversation, kind of best practices for having a conversation with someone that you want to develop a professional relationship with.
Yeah, so like how do I connect personally with them, right? Is basically like that's sort of the uncomfortable part of it.
Yeah, because it can be kind of weird. Like you're trying to,
Yeah, it feels kind of like you're making a cold call. And
yeah.
then how do I get from cold call to, something where, we're talking back and forth?
Yeah, so you don't want it to be super you want to make sure that you are, I don't know, like establishing a personal connection with them because you're going to be taking care of their land, which then takes care of you and your family. So, educator Chris, do you have any tips on establishing a personal connection?
Yeah, it's one of the most important things I think on that is to make sure and, do active listening. So trying to make sure you have undivided attention. You're not playing with your cell
Laying around your
phone with your
phone.
while you're talking, and you're really, you don't necessarily have to eye lock, but you're looking them in the eye and that kind of thing, and then maybe repeat back some things from time to time, not everything to parrot them or anything, but just to let them know you hear what they're saying. So
Yeah.
and then uh you know, talking about different activities, farming activities that you do, or things that you care about related to farming. So I know, Cheyenne, you work a lot with soil health,
I
right?
love soil health.
So let's say you're renting me land, I'm going to want to talk about how, hey, here's what I do. Here's my approach to nutrients. Here's what I
Hmm.
do for inputs and things like that, how I keep an eye on them with soil tests and such to try and make that connection with common grounds kind of thing.
Yeah, and soil health was one of the reasons that Farmer Chris reached out to me originally, and he's also very big into soil health. Not only is it important that everyone feels good during this interaction and that you're active listening and all of that stuff, but I think you also mentioned that you have some hesitancies too because you're not the only one taking like the landowner isn't just taking a risk, you're also taking a risk.
Yeah, well, I've got to invest again nutrients for soil
Hmm.
health,
Hmm.
or
And it's not your land.
it's not my land, so how much can I invest in that? So that's for me a challenge, and and another thing is I worry a little bit about things like spraying and
Hmm.
what are they going to think? I know that's sometimes a problem and things like that.
Those are really important things to talk about, like no-till and spraying and stuff like that, and making sure that you have some alignment on that. So what would your comment on that be, educator Chris?
Well, I think it's really important to identify those challenges
Hmm.
that are risk for all parties. So on the one hand, you want to try and establish that personal connection. On the other hand, you want to make sure and find those issues that could lead to it not being a match and finding them ahead instead of afterwards,
Yeah,
right?
once you're already in a contract.
Yeah. So that spraying thing, make sure you address that. You can talk to them. Maybe you're telling them things that they haven't heard before. They just think that maybe it could be unhealthy in that. So, you could talk to them and say, well, actually this is what we spray for. We spray at night often and try to reduce risk. And
Mhm.
yeah, and one of the things that you, you know uh you could talk about is if it would be make you more comfortable, I could let you know why we're spraying what we're spraying.
Mhm.
So hey, Cheyenne, there's codling moths today. So I got to go out and get them, or it's going to put worms in the apples or in
And no one wants worms in their apples.
right. And so like then I kind of know and I can make the thing and it'll probably be this time of night and this kind of thing. So that would be one thing that if somebody had an aversion to spraying, that might be a method to get around that, just notifying them.
And affirming and making sure you explain everything that you're doing and why you're doing it and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Just providing some of that education to, because it depends on the landowner, right? So they might be a farmer, they
Yeah.
might be an extension educator, but they might be, the somebody that just bought the land not too long ago, or they just haven't been involved in farming, and so just some basic education will help them, feel more at ease with what you're doing.
To me, educator Chris, it kind of sounds like you're saying that flexibility and being open to other things is really important in this relationship.
Yeah, I think so. There is sometimes a hard stop, right, where this isn't
Hmm.
going to be a match. But often I think the flexibility, maybe in how the lease is written up and everything is just as simple. Somebody wants a certain thing added in and
No
you,
spraying
you know,
after midnight or
yeah,
whatever.
something like that. And yeah, so I think flexibility can help make things happen. Yeah,
Be
for sure.
because they want to be happy and you want to be happy.
Yeah, and it's the discourse that gets you there, right?
Hmm.
And it's talking about things ahead that keeps you out of problems in the future.
As all farmers and educators know, the weather changes a lot, markets change a lot, and I'm sure that's something that is on your mind. And that's something that you brought up as a top of mind concern for you during these conversations, right, Farmer Kiss?
Right now, I'm looking at, pretty marginal, prices for different products, especially corn and beans are pretty tough right
Hmm.
now, right? So, the rental price really makes a difference and
Can make or break.
could make or break the situation. Yeah. So, and then also, diesel's up and fertilizer's up across crops. So, just, you know, I, I don't really know how to explain that kind of stuff without, how do I do that?
Yeah, yeah, that immediately talking about needing to make money can sometimes make things feel impersonal and weird. Yeah, and so like you were saying, there's a lot of variables at play, but I'm sure educator Chris can tell us that there's also going to be some variability from the landowner side as well.
Yeah, yeah, I think, and that may be helpful to ask them about what their goals are again. But maybe property tax went up for them,
Hmm.
so that's maybe a good conversation into, if you're able to ask about what are your goals, and they say, well, I want to cover taxes and maybe the insurance,
Hmm.
and then ask about property tax. Well, maybe that went up, and then that gives you an end to talk about, well, hey. Fertilizers up. These are a couple of tough years right now for field crops. So might incorporate that in the rent as well as incorporating their goals in the rent. So yeah, I think being able to talk a little bit about it, reflect back to their position a little bit. I heard for example, so I heard your taxes are going up, so you're going to need something for
Hmm.
that.
And
Um,
that kind of goes back to active listening and being like, you said that your taxes went up and
Yes, exactly, exactly. And we're not really expecting people to talk like financial experts, just more like hit those main things, that are bottom line issues for you. And often that might be related to price and might be related to the state of the industry.
mostly we've talked about renting so far, Farmer Chris, and you mentioned that you might also be interested in buying some land.
We may have funds that we can use to buy a certain amount of
Hmm.
the land we're needing and interested in. But when I look at what's out there, some people have conservation agreements. In certain situation, it's the people are living in their home, and so like, how do you work out a deal like that?
Yeah, so the concerns you might have when buying aren't dissimilar from renting, but they're not exactly the same as renting. So what would you say, educator Chris, when it comes to thinking about things to think about when it comes to buying land?
Well, I'd say a lot of the things that we've already been talking about are definitely apply. So all the leasing concerns, the soft skills, the listening for things and trying to get to the bottom of the challenges for the different party, the different risks and everything. All that's going to apply with the buying side as well. Um, Conservation goals might come in more as a deal because if somebody might say, well, I want to sell the farm, but I want this to be, dedicated to, certain types of activities where you
Hmm.
couldn't build on it. Just so, you know, if that's part of the deal, you really have to just look at the details there and see, is that something that can work out? So is a conservation easement going to go on prior to the purchase or after? And what does that conservation easement look like? How much does it tie you up in the future? And then I would say, when it comes to things like the house, so if somebody's got an 80-acre farm and they're living on the house and they plan to stay there, through old age and all that kind of thing, would you be able to make that happen by purchasing the land with a life lease? That kind of thing is possible. But it can be a little more complex than in terms of the financing and legal documents and things like that. Use those those soft skills to try and figure out, the answer, the legal options and such like that might work. So of course you'll be going back and forth as you get closer in, working with an attorney and stuff. But the conversations that you have with the landowner are what's, going to pique enough interest to maybe get in the door and
Yeah.
learn more. So yeah.
Yeah, so whether it's leasing or buying, it's important to have good soft skills and making sure that you are communicating your needs and realizing that it's going to be a mutually beneficial partnership.
Yeah, and I think it's important to think about too that you can do this. It's not the soft skills are not it's just being willing to ask that question, be willing to listen and kind of walk through it. They can be uncomfortable conversations at first, but once you get used to it, these skills are pretty easily, you get good at it.
Yeah, soft skills are definitely something that not everyone necessarily has, but are important to build on and can help in things not just buying and renting land, but I'm sure but it can also help in other aspects.
Well, thank you so much, Cheyenne. This is really, really helpful. So, yeah, I appreciate it, and I will give those things a try.